Everyone at one point in their life was asked the question, where are you from? To many, this question could be simple. State the country that you were born and reside within. Yet third culture kids don't have it this easy. We're the kids who had to live in different countries and adapt to different cultures during a crucial part of our developmental years. This question is usually followed with dread and anxiety because you don't know if you should give a vague answer or bring in your entire life story. Yeah, my parents are from here, and then I was born here, and then I moved here, and so on. As third culture kids, we don't have one home. And this is such a frustrating thing to live with, and it all leads back to basic psychology. It's in human nature to want to belong to a group. But when you move around all your life, it makes it hard to find that group you belong to. So, in 2005, a bomb hit my older brother's school in Iraq. The bomb struck fear within my family because although my brother was lucky to survive, many children didn't have that opportunity. I left Iraq the following year at the age of 5, and ever since then I've been on the move. First, we moved to the UAE for the main reason of safety. We were tired. We were tired from seeing ongoing war and accepting death as the norm. UAE as a place was wonderful due to the similarity in culture. We followed the same Arab culture norms, traditions, and language. Since I saw no difference between the way my household lives and the norms of UAE culture, I quickly identified UAE as my home. But by the time I fully adapted to UAE as my country, 2010 rolled around, and I was told I was moving, again, and this time, to Canada. From that point on, I became an outsider. Now, Iraq is my homeland, and yet it seems to be the one that I can relate to the least. This is because I only lived there for the first 5 years of my life, which makes it hard to remember anything about it. The only thing I did know about it was the media's perception of it. As a child, when I saw my country being portrayed as this dangerous war zone, I tried to dissociate myself from it as best as I could. I also realized that I was different from my extended family because of the different views that we had on social issues. Unlike them, my middle school years were spent in Canada, a place that has a much more liberal thought process. I remember one time I had a conversation with my grandma about careers, and she told me that I shouldn't worry because in the end, a man will take care of me. To her, this was the ideal lifestyle. But I grew up learning that women should be independent and should strive for their own careers. I realized that I was being overlooked by my extended family because I'm seen as too westernized. And this made me feel as if I'm some sort of stranger rather than a family member simply because my opinions were seen as tainted. Now, the fact that I wasn't the typical Iraqi didn't mean that I instantly belonged to Canada. My Middle Eastern roots were still embedded within me, and that shaped a part of me that stopped me from fully engaging within Canadian culture. I remember coming to Canada and being so taken back by this new lifestyle. Never in my life was I the person that stood out among the crowd. But being the new Arab girl with the thick Arabic accent who comes from this exotic city, I was bound to gain attention. It took a particular situation for me to realize that being different was something that I should be ashamed of. I was about 11 years old in a store with a family friend, and we were standing in line for the cashier. The family friend decided to leave the line in order to return something and come back. When she did, a woman in the back started to sigh really loudly as if she was annoyed about something. I look back and, of course, she looks at my mother who wears a hijab and starts yelling at us. "Go back to your own country. You don't belong here." My mother didn't care. She simply stayed in line, paid for our stuff, and left. On the other hand, I felt really scared and embarrassed. I felt as if I was the one that should leave and that I was the one costing them their time, even though I didn't do anything wrong. And I started to relive this moment anytime something bad happened to me. If someone snapped at me, I started to think it was because of where I came from or how I looked. And eventually, this insecurity made simple things like walking around in the mall uncomfortable. And eventually, it turned to hatred, and I made it a mission to myself to try to change who I was. Now, when my brother and I started gathering more of a Canadian accent and accepting more of their traditions, my mother tried to desperately bring us back to our Middle Eastern roots. This was something that I absolutely hated, because all I wanted to be was Canadian. But I kept getting told that I wasn't when we skipped school for Eid traditions, or being told that I can't wear a pair of shorts because it's too revealing, when it was really just an article of clothing that all the other girls in class were wearing. I remember my brother and I had to go to Arabic school each Sunday. We would go from morning to afternoon learning Arabic and Islam with another group of kids who also felt uncomfortable being there. I just remember sitting in class and being so uncomfortable because I couldn't quite fit in and see the beauty of learning a language. Eventually, it was so bad that I was barely getting C's and I was happy with it. I thought that getting bad grades meant that my mom would stop teaching me Arabic, but it only pushed her harder. And that was one of the things that strained our relationship. Now, I did have a lot of Middle Eastern friends, and they were actually much more comfortable to be around and shared the same struggles as I did. But I ended up pushing them away. It was this idea that if I pushed my Arabic friends away, I'd only have my Canadian friends, which would make me more Canadian. It was a very toxic mindset that I still regret to this day, because I keep wondering, maybe if I wasn't so distant, I might have actually saved those friendships today. Every party I missed or phone call I ignored was just a way for me to deal with my own insecurity about my roots and culture. Now, I finally began to accept who I was when I moved back to the UAE in 2015. I remember coming to DAA and being so taken back by the international culture. In Canada, despite people having different ethnicities, their culture was largely based on Canadian traditions. When I came to the UAE, I was taken back about how international it was because I realized that in the UAE, it's notorious for change. People here come and go all the time. It's not like Canada where people spend most of their life there. This means there isn't a model example to be or a model culture to follow because everyone was different. And that sense of constant change actually made me feel comfortable with who I am and the ability to express myself. Eventually, I actually started to enjoy learning more about my culture, and I realized I'm just going to have to juggle my Middle Eastern and Canadian culture together because that's just who I am. Now, there's a lot of things that communities who do struggle with cultural diversity can do in order to make their children more culturally aware and to make sure that third culture kids embrace who they are. The first thing is to promote the success of international people. And this could be done by simply putting in books and movies in the library in order to promote their success. Not only will that make the community more culturally aware, but it will also make third culture kids feel encouraged to embrace who they are. Another thing is to interview immigrants for the local newspaper. And this will make the community more aware of their struggles and will create a level of understanding between the two groups in society. Also, encourage public schools to celebrate days such as Culture Day. This will make children be able to see the fun in cultural diversity. And finally, encourage high school and college students to come in and talk to younger students about cultural diversity in order for them to realize its importance. Now, any community can do this with the right mindset and motivation. And it's so important that communities do become more culturally aware in order to make sure that their children are able to adapt to this constantly globalized world. And to make sure that third culture kids feel encouraged to embrace who they are. Because if not, we're at risk of losing years of cultural values and tradition. So I guess it's safe to say, if I lived in one place my entire life, my life would be different. And I ask myself, is that really a good thing? If I lived in one place, I'd have one single home. A place where I had family, friends, and memories. I wouldn't worry all the time about someone I love having to leave or always traveling to rekindle with others. Yet there's also this certain sense of beauty and privilege that comes with being a third culture kid that no one really sees. The privilege of finding an identity for myself that's not defined by any cultural standards. Now let me explain. When I see my grandmother or older cousin who lives in Iraq most of their life, they almost seem similar. They all agree with the values of their culture, and their views on social norm always line up with tradition because that's what they grew up learning. On the other hand, I grew up in different countries, and I didn't have one set of rules to follow because I kept moving, which means that I didn't have to abide to a community's rules. No matter how difficult it is to feel lost as a third culture kid, there's a sense of privilege that I'll always be grateful for, the ability to define myself. The anatomy of a third culture kid is complicated. In a society that likes to label everything, we're the odd ones out. Third culture kids often belong to so many places that often our home country is just a passport country. And a lot of them do feel the strong urge to belong, but the truth is we cannot be tied down to one place. So instead of focusing on what we don't have, let's focus on what we gained. So you know what? I'll never have one single home. And yes, the question, where are you from, will still probably be the most frustrating question to be asked. But now I take pride in who I am because of the fact that I have freedom. I can be whoever I want to be, and I won't have to be a carbon copy of someone else just because that's the norm of the community. I'm 16, and I don't know who I am yet or who I will be. But I know for sure that whoever I will be is up to me and no one else. Because to live a happy life is to live your own life. Thank you.